Hey guys, welcome back to the What's Next podcast. Coming to you from beautiful Monterey, California, right here on the beach. Today we've got an amazing guest with us. I started this podcast a few years back, and I love to talk to people about where they got to in life and how they got there and the path that they took. And this guy just has an amazing journey behind him, and I've heard stories of all over the world. Today we've got retired full bird Colonel Bruce Sweeney. How you doing today, Bruce?
I'm well, thanks, Steve.
Good. So glad to have you on the program. I know it's been tough to get you on. You were traveling, and I was gone, and we finally got you.
Yep, here I am.
Yeah, buddy. So, what you got going on today? You walked in, you said, huh?
Yep.
Getting a walking exercise going on?
Yep.
Right on.
One of the things I do to try and stay fit.
Sure. Right. Yeah. Well, I want to talk to you about how you got to be where you are. It's you've gone so many different directions now. Where did you grow up? Where did you start at as a young lad?
Well, I was born in Seattle, Washington.
Oh, were you? Okay.
Yeah, and then my dad worked at United Airlines, and he got moved to Chicago O'Hare, where that was
Sure.
the top of the game there, and that's where they had their headquarters. So I grew up in Illinois. It's pretty flat, but they get plenty of snow.
Yes.
Plenty of ice and all that. So I got to enjoy, to the point where I enjoyed winter.
Sure.
And then
got a little bit of Lake Michigan up there. Did you get to the lake or?
I never did with my parents, but
No.
I did when I was at Michigan State, and when I would come home, I would stop at the dunes and stuff like that.
Oh, right. Sleeping Bear Dunes and sure.
Yeah.
I forgot you went to Michigan State, just like my mom and dad and brother and everybody in my family.
Yeah, you're the outcast.
I am, right? I just decided to hit the road. Yep. So I remember you saying that you were you did some ROTC when you were young, or what got you into the military way of thinking? Was it the airlines with your dad, or?
No, it wasn't. It didn't really. My dad didn't really encourage me or discourage me at all.
Right.
But my mom and dad were divorced, and my mom had a certain amount of money that she had that was available, and so she had this conversation with me, and she said that my older sister, she was sort of a secretary kind of thing, and she can still type 100. I don't know what's 100.
That's a skill.
Scales at 100 things a minute and stuff without failing anything.
Yeah, right.
And she wasn't making a lot of money, but she was doing well. And then my mom said, "Well, I don't have enough money to send you and Christy and David both." And she said, "So you'll be all right. You'll get a scholarship."
Sure.
And that's word for word. That's what she said.
Really?
Yeah, which made me think, I better start looking at scholarships.
Or what it takes to get a scholarship and hone in on that.
Yeah, and so then I went to University of Illinois for a trip with one of my friends from high school, and we looked at that, and we went to Michigan State, and he ended up going down to someplace in Georgia. I think his mother was from Georgia.
Oh, okay, right.
And I visited Michigan State, and it's a beautiful campus.
It's a great party school.
Yeah, it was. Probably still is. I don't know.
Right? It's a little crazy there sometimes.
Yeah, and then they had a good ROTC program there.
Oh, okay.
And I applied for a scholarship. So they said, okay. And so the bottom line was, I had to be in ROTC. I had to do 4 years there and graduate, and then I would own the Army 5 years. I got room and board and a little tiny, sort of travel thing for Christmas and stuff. And then when I graduated, I graduated in 1917, and then right away, pretty much, I got 2 weeks. I was off to Fort Stewart, Georgia.
That was back in, 1977?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Wow. So active duty, And then you were there till 1990, or for quite a while. It looks like from 77 to 90, active duty,
Yep.
TC officer.
Yeah, TC is Transportation Corps.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where you started.
Yeah.
When they pay for your college.
Yeah. You owe them.
You owe them
basically
5 years.
Yeah, for 5 years.
Right. Perfect.
And so I went kind of right away, and so there's many branches in the Army. Everybody knows about the MPs
Sure.
and about the pilots
Yeah.
and some of the other things, but the other things, transportation, logistics, all those other things have to happen too.
Yeah.
And so I got, they sort of figure out what they think you'll be good at, and you
right.
give, you get like two choices, and if you don't like them, they'll give you one.
Right. You better take one of the two.
Yeah, and so I thought that would be a good place to start.
Sure.
And it was, and I was I was a transportation officer for many years.
Were you really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. What were you transporting? Just humans and everything?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a number of courses they make you go to. There's the basic course and then an advanced course. In the advanced course, they teach you a lot more about how we manage all those trucks, those deuce and a halves and stuff like that. And then there's also, if you are interested in being a pilot, transportation is where they get the Army pilots.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And now, obviously, the Air Force has a lot more pilots than the Army, but the Army has a lot of pilots.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they do a lot of.
No kidding.
Yeah, a lot of things. Mostly helicopters.
Mostly helicopters. I've seen the Army helicopters, right?
Anyway, so I was never interested in flying.
Oh, you weren't?
Nope.
Yeah.
Never did anything for it. But I was in a truck company.
So where were you when you were doing that? Were you in Washington D.C.? Where do you do the transportation? Is that?
There's a place called Fort Eustis, Virginia.
Oh, okay. You're in Virginia,
and that's where they do all the basic stuff to train folks as not just officers, but also some of the enlisted folks for their transportation people.
Right.
Teach them how to drive the trucks. Teach them how to do all the other things that go. We also have rail, and they also have the Army has a lot of ships, and if we go to war, the Army is responsible for what happens at the shipping areas.
Okay.
The Navy's job is to go out and make sure that nobody's having trouble out there.
I see.
And so when there's a real port and we have to run the port, the port is managed by the Army Transportation Corps.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which most people don't know.
Yeah, so you're working closely with the Navy to get your transportation to wherever it needs to be, and then you take it over from there.
Yeah, but what we'll do is we'll actually go and take over the port and manage the whole place until the program's over.
Nice. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's different. Most people don't know that either.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. We want to learn this stuff.
Yeah, and so I learned a lot about all the different kinds of transportation we have.
Sure.
We have a lot of. You don't see it as much now as we did when I was a young officer, but they had a lot of freight. If you're moving a tank,
Exactly.
you need a big vehicle.
Yeah. So the tank itself isn't part of transportation, but you got to transport the tank.
Right.
I see. Right.
Yeah.
And fuel and everything else it takes to get there. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot, especially when you got so many different things going on in all different parts of the world like we do now.
Yeah.
You got to kind of figure out, okay, we've got this many here. Can we afford to take, right? Or,
yeah, that's a question.
Yeah.
If we, like when we went to the Gulf War, that went really fast, the first Gulf War, right?
Yeah.
The second Gulf War was a terrible mess.
Yeah.
But the transportation stuff went pretty well.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, that's a tough one there because you're dealing in some sand and desert, and it's just probably the worst thing for a vehicle you could possibly do.
It is, but that's why we have all those, we have all the lubes and all those things that we will
Sure.
ship. Takes them a little longer to get there,
Yeah.
but they will eventually, you'll have all the things you need.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what transportation folks do.
Yeah. I remember somebody talking about, I think it was Eagle Claw, where there was so many problems with the sand that just took out some of our machines. We must have had to go into some crazy invention to figure out how to seal the bearings or whatever they were having problems with. You guys must have had to start over on some of those things.
They did,
I bet.
but they also found some ways. Some of them were easier to fix. There were a couple of little things that made it work, and sometimes a tiny little thing can ruin your engine, right?
Right.
And so
right.
they had a couple of those, and they decided, we need to change this.
Yeah, right.
And as soon as they got something like that, they're on it, and they try to get it out and working again.
And off running.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So how did you go from being in transportation to Defense Attaché? That's quite a leap, isn't it?
It is. Well, it takes a long time.
Yeah, right. So you were till 2001. It looks like you're a civilian work in government, in D.C. and Baltimore. Then Hungary. In 2001, you went to Hungary. Was that a?
We did, but in between, in 2000, so I got out of the Army for a while and then came back in as a reservist.
Okay.
And I ended up doing things that I enjoyed doing. And so so then I was doing well, and I got an opportunity to go and graduated from the U.S. Army War College.
That was the gap I had there. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
and what happens, a lot of colonels apply for that. It's actually harder to get into the War College than it is to get promoted to colonel.
no kidding.
Yeah,
Wow.
there are a lot of colonels that don't have the right background.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
No kidding.
I found that out while I was there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
So
and
you're a select few that got to go there,
Correct.
and very few pass.
Well, a very large number applied. A very small number got to actually go.
Oh, I see. Right. So that's kind of how you made the jump.
That's how I made the jump. I had already, you start out as a second lieutenant, and then you are a first lieutenant, and then you become a captain, and then you become a major, and then you become a lieutenant colonel, and if everything's going well, you become a colonel. And a lot of guys do a certain number of time in the Army and go, and some people stay.
Yeah.
And I stayed because I got all these opportunities to do interesting work.
Sure. Yeah.
And a good example is I was still a second lieutenant, and I'd been in the Army like 2 years. And the colonel of my division, he was tapped to go to Fort Drum and do an evaluation of one of the reserve units in the National Guard for New York.
Mm.
And so the colonel called me over. His deputy called me over and said, "Hey, I want you to come see the colonel." I'm literally a second lieutenant.
What?
And I still wet behind the ears.
I know, right?
And I'd done a couple things really well, and so they thought I was worthy of doing it. And so there was a captain and a sergeant major and me that supported the colonel who was doing the exercise. And all through my career, all of a sudden, I was doing something, finished it, and something new came out. And sometimes the lieutenant colonel who worked with me there and the colonel, they'd sometimes say, "Hey, Sweeney, why don't you do this?" And I was like, "What's wrong with this picture? I'm still a second lieutenant."
Right. How many people didn't want to do this, right?
Well, I figured I would learn something at the very least.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking to your wife one day, and she said that they would send you into places that weren't operating as well as they could be, and they knew that you would straighten everything out.
Yeah, after a while, when I was like,
I thought that's really neat. That's neat. They had a lot of belief in you, and if it's just not acting right or whatever it is, whether it be a compound or a post or whatever, you send Sweeney there and he'll take care of that and straighten it all up and get everything ship shape. I thought that was neat for her to say.
Yeah, I was blessed to be. For some reason, I was very good at working with the soldiers in particular.
I see, right.
And so my approach to leadership is to make sure that you take care of your people first. And the most important two things are treat every person in your unit with dignity and respect. Right. That one statement, if practiced, can change everything.
Right.
And I did that when I was then, when I got out of the Army for a while, and was doing other things. I used that same thing.
Right.
Because if you treat people well, they'll go to bat for you all the time.
Yeah, they want to work with you. Sure.
Yeah, nobody likes to be, working for some jerk who's always giving them a hard time.
Sure. We've all had those knuckleheads, but we've always had a teacher or somebody that really stands out. That wow, he really looked at me with, like you say, dignity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you'll hold that, for the rest of your life. That makes a huge difference. That's great.
It does, and it works every place I've ever been.
But you also have to make the people above you happy, too. You're kind of in a weird position in the military, though, because you're kind of in between, aren't you? You got to make these guys happy, but make sure the under people are happy, too.
Yeah, and there were sometimes when when they had already had somebody try to do that, and then they called me.
Right.
And I'm not going to tell you that everything always went perfect, but I was always able to sort it out to make it work.
Sure. Right.
And therefore, I got more stuff to do because I didn't screw it up.
Right.
That's a common Army thing. Hey, you didn't screw it up. Well, let's do it again.
Yeah, my dad always used to say, like the military, like the Army, hurry up and wait.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
So you jumped out. What exactly did you do when you took that little break? Looks like you worked for in Baltimore and D.C. Before you went back in.
I had done my obligation.
Yeah.
So I decided to get out and take a look at what normal people did.
Civilian life,
what civilian life was like. Yeah. And I was, pretty capable, and I did okay.
Yeah.
And I went to work for two different. I worked for one company for a while that worked okay, and then we had what happened when Newt Gingrich first decided to shut down. That was the first time they'd done that. The company I was working for was not as prosperous as they wanted to be.
I see.
And we had I was the lead for one of the programs they were doing, and they needed somebody that they had seen what I was done. I was able to turn around some of the things that weren't going well.
Right, yeah.
And then when they knocked down, there wasn't going to be anybody, we weren't sure if they were going to be paid or anything.
Yeah.
Then the company I was working for were thinking about, we're going to have to get rid of some people.
Sure.
Maybe one of them was going to be me.
Yeah.
But because I'd done a great job on that subcontract, they offered me an opportunity to go to Ukraine.
Oh, really?
Because I fixed it in D.C. And at the time, my first wife is bipolar.
Yeah.
And for a long time, it took a long time to figure that out.
Yeah.
And after a while, it was really hard to work with.
Right.
And I'd met Keely and liked her pretty well, and we were dating, and I had it was like, well, I got to do something.
Sure.
And I thought, going someplace else, something new.
Yeah.
Might help me figure out what I want to do.
Just clean the slate.
Yeah.
Blow the cobwebs out of your brain, right?
Yeah. And so I decided to take the job.
Yeah.
And I didn't speak any. I spoke good French, but I didn't speak any Russian at the time.
Right.
But while I was there, so I went on this particular project. I was able to clean it out. It went very well. It was going well. And while I was there, we took a group of Hungarians to, we took a group of Ukrainians to Budapest because they were trying to help the Ukrainians to go from a controlled economy to a real thriving kind of capitalist system. And it was so we had 5 different centers, and I went to each of them periodically, see how they were doing, were they making progress, what was missing, things like that. And we were able to help them actually start becoming more and more capitalist. It was more of market economy, which they really didn't have.
Yeah.
And some of you didn't have any of that.
Right.
And when Gorbachev, decided to get rid of the Soviet Union, they needed to figure out what to do next. And so that was the USAID project that I worked on.
I see,
and
right.
gave me a lot of time to think through what I wanted to do.
Right. And that you were in Hungary at that time, or?
We just went for like 2 weeks.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah, for them to get a feel for it.
Yeah, you've been so many different places here. It's hard for me to keep straight. Then off to Africa.
Yeah, I decided to come back and got an opportunity to go back on active duty and.
Oh, that's right. That's when you went
later.
back on active duty. Okay.
Yeah, and so.
Then you naturally went off to Hungary because you've been helping these hungry people.
Right.
I would imagine.
Yeah, I became a defense attaché in Hungary.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, and that was great. That was
fun.
I
bet.
Yeah, I learned
Tell
a lot
me about
there,
Hungary. I don't know anything about Hungary.
Well, it's a beautiful place
Is it?
to go visit. Yeah, I recommend it if you want to go for an interesting trip.
Yeah.
There's a lot of history there.
Is it more like Russian, or is it
No, it's
Eastern European? I don't know.
It's pretty normal European, but
Yeah.
the current president's a complete jerk.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
There's always that.
Yeah, I mean, like Erdogan, they always trying to get their own way. But the folks I worked with and the people we met, lovely, lovely people, Hungarians.
Yeah, right.
And the women are beautiful.
The civilians are always great. It's the government that's it's a nightmare.
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah.
So what?
Yeah, there was a dangerous place to be with all those girls.
Too many pretty Hungarian women.
Every now and then I get a call from an ambassador about a guy who wasn't doing so well.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to a lot of places.
Did you, right? Just to check in?
Some of them straightened it out, and some of them didn't.
Really?
Yeah. Some people, I mean, you've been around a while, sometimes you see a guy who's pretty good or a gal who's very good at what they do, and 3 months later, suddenly they fall apart, right?
Yeah.
You just can't predict what happens.
Right.
And since I spoke French, because there's a lot of French in Africa, and I'd been to Africa briefly and so forth, and so I ended up running the place for a couple of years.
Yeah, nice.
And it was interesting things that I got to see.
Yeah, right.
Learned a lot about Africa.
Is Ethiopia, is that in Africa? I'm sorry for my
no, it's in Africa. It's they don't have a coastline.
I see.
They are
landlocked, kind of a.
They're somewhat landlocked, but they are close to the Nile.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so they have access to.
Yeah, there's the Blue
Commerce.
Nile and the White Nile. And
really?
There's the Nile that comes from the river itself, and then there's the flow that comes from the Red Sea.
Oh, okay.
And so it's and in Khartoum is where it meets, and it just crashes together. And I was able to go see that.
Wow.
Yeah, that was interesting.
And so is that their shipping? Is that they use the rivers?
Yeah,
for
they move things.
I see.
Through the water.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, and they just don't have the ports and so forth. That years and years ago they did have good ports, but then when they split, Ethiopia used to include Eritrea. When Eritreans got their independence, they blew off the regular Ethiopians, and so they don't have a port, and that's the problem.
Oh, right.
So
when I was young, we saw a lot of those commercials about Ethiopia with all the starving kids, and they're just little skeletons with the big bellies on them, and thought, boy, that must be just a terrible place. And
it's actually not a terrible place. It was a terrible situation they were in.
Well, years ago, a few years back, I had an Uber, and the guy was from Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And he just loved America, and his dream was to start a restaurant with Ethiopian food. And I thought Ethiopians were starving to death. I guess that's all I know as an American,
Yeah.
So the whole country isn't constantly starving. It was just something that they went through when I was younger, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And
we just never got the update that they got better.
Well, and there were times later that they had other famines, but not as big as the one you're thinking about.
Okay,
that
right.
one was a huge problem.
UNICEF and everybody was
Yeah.
involved, and we just felt so bad for those poor people. Yeah, but
Yep.
It's not all like that, huh?
No,
Okay.
not at all.
Yeah.
Although there's more than you'd like to see.
Yeah, because of corruption or just lack of
Corruption, too many people, too many wars.
Yeah.
And you really can't blame the U.S. Army, but the Ethiopians. They occasionally fight against each other,
Sure.
and
Right.
that's sad.
Sure.
What,
Right.
What do we say? We had the Civil War too.
Since the beginning of time, we've been having wars. Since we could pick up a rock and throw it at each other.
Yeah.
Stupid humans.
Sadly.
I know, crazy. Well, okay, so what a history you got. Holy cow. So from Africa, you went to Iraq. So 2005 to 2006, you were in Iraq.
I was.
That doesn't sound like a fun place to be. What was going on in 2006? Was that when...
That was
post 9/11?
Yeah, post 9/11, and I was in charge of a classified program that we were doing,
I see.
and sort of doing some intelligence work.
Right.
It was
right,
intelligence. I was commander of a large intelligence operation that we ran for a number of years until things settled down.
Right.
Yeah.
Just we'll skip over that if it was.
It wasn't
it's all
terrible.
classified.
No, it's classified still. I mean, I can tell you what I was doing. What I just said, that's fine.
Yeah.
But there are things I can't talk about.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Exactly.
because of what I did, and all that.
Sure. Right. Well, it's a crazy time.
It was.
Crazy time there.
Yeah, and then I went. I think I had 3 months off, and then went to Afghanistan. I mean,
send me back to Iraq.
Well, my kids,
Jeez,
and
Pete.
Keely and my kids were at home in Annapolis.
Oh, I see. Okay, good.
But I was in Iraq and then in Afghanistan.
Wow.
And by the time I got to Afghanistan, my Russian was pretty good.
Was it?
Yeah.
There's no Russian there, though, is there?
Yeah,
Afghanistan.
there is some.
Is there?
Well, because the Russians invaded, and
did,
they
didn't they?
had some things. So
Right.
so there's some folks there that did learn and can speak Russian. And,
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would not have guessed that.
No, but that's because over time,
Yeah.
they kind of made peace and
With the Russians.
and they work with the things that work, and they
Yeah.
try not to make trouble with the things that don't work.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess
came for some. We did some of the same in the U.S.
Yeah. I guess you hear through the media, Russia went in there and they tried to do whatever they could, and they basically lost. They had to get out of there. Was that kind of how it went, or?
No,
we
made progress in some places.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And the bottom line was we didn't have nobody came up with a strategy that would work, or the people in charge couldn't seem to come up with one that they were willing to both or all of them to help. So they just kind of eventually just let it fall backwards.
Yeah.
Almost everybody I knew and worked with at my rank, we knew that it wasn't the soldiers and guys like us, it was the politicians that didn't want to take certain things on.
I see. Theirs or ours?
Ours.
Our politicians, yeah. Right. Well, you're not going to just switch them over to an American way of thinking.
No, not at all.
It's just not going to happen with a bunch of Afghans that are farmers and they're out.
Yeah, well,
sure, there's cities, but most of it is just rural people, right?
Yeah, the only person who's ever really conquered those guys was Alexander.
The Great.
The only one. No one else has ever beaten them.
No kidding.
Against their will, never.
Right.
Nope. And they'll go hide in the mountains for years.
Exactly.
And tough people, let them go.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Having been there, we just didn't do that particularly well.
Yeah. Right.
We have the capability, but we didn't have the appropriate leadership to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah, we had
my perspective.
You and I had breakfast with Changiz that one morning, and he was telling that they were up in the mountains trying to find weapons and that kind of thing, and they would come across stashes of weapons, but it's like, no, these are from the 90s. This isn't what we're looking for. This is stuff from before, It's like,
and some of it was from the Russians.
It's just a revolving. Yeah, some from the Russians, and then us before that, and it's like, oh, what a nightmare that must be.
Yeah, it was.
We fund them, give them all the weapons, then we go fight them against our own weapons, and as a civilian, you just scratch your head, going, I don't know what happened there.
Oh, you had the same problem if you were in the Army, like I was. Yeah, my colleagues and I, we'd talk about it, and we'd say, what the hell are we doing?
What's going on here?
Yeah,
right. It's the politicians.
We don't always do it right.
Yeah.
And it started with Vietnam.
Sure.
We should never, if we had not done that, the whole thing would have been very, very different for us now.
Right.
But that's way too deep in the past.
But we got lied to, and we jumped into it for bad reasons and non-existent reasons. What was that?
Yeah, Kennedy signed it off, and he thought that would be a good idea. It was the dumbest thing they ever did.
Oh, Kennedy got us into that one?
Yeah.
It was a little before my time.
The Vietnamese were fighting with the French, and he thought that might be a good idea to help him, and that turned out to be the worst thing he ever done.
Wow. That turned out to be a nightmare. Just like Afghanistan, they crawl in the
similar,
holes, and they're hidden so well, you can't draw them out.
Well, not without it can be done.
Sure.
But you have to put an awful lot of effort into it. And
right.
And then there's a lot of casualties, and you got to really, really do. One of the things that the War College taught me was all the things that you need to do. First of all, you got to have a strategy and a policy and all those things. And without those, you'll never be successful.
Mm. You feel like you went in without those completed?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So I remember you were saying that you weren't real happy with the Bush administration. Now, what exactly were you talking? They made some bad decisions, or was that that was more during 9/11 back just the beginning of 2000, right?
Yeah.
2010. What was going on? What do you mean by that? Do you think they made some bad decisions, or how they were running it?
Well, the Bush administration, W was a terrible president.
Was that the first one, or
the original?
Junior.
Junior was.
He was a knucklehead.
Yeah, I mean, he really didn't understand what he was doing.
I see.
Right. And the Cheney and Rumsfeld and Bush, every single decision they made about that war was wrong.
Really?
Yes.
How could they do that?
Because they were in charge and nobody challenged them.
There's just politics, and there's people behind them making decisions for them.
Yeah, well, Cheney was the guy who was trying to tell Bush what to do.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
you seemed like a hero for a while at the beginning, through the press and everything else. And
and then it went the way of the Welling, the
right.
Yeah, the way of the lemmings, right? Just
like it's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, where were we? Iraq. And then you went on. You went on to Afghanistan.
Yep.
You're defense attaché there also.
Yeah.
That
so
was
my
a
job
huge
was
operation. Holy crap!
My job was to work with the ambassador as his military support, and obviously there are lots of other people, and so my job wasn't all that important because there was a 4-star general in charge of the overall thing.
Okay.
But I was involved in a lot of the things, and there was a big ceremony, and we weren't allowed to bring weapons in or anything, and then come to find out later, out come the Taliban shooting at us,
Unarmed.
Unarmed.
Oh no.
And now we're getting shot at, and we got some real stuff coming at us.
RPGs and stuff like that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but that's
I'm just trying to have a good time here. Dang it.
Well, there were some really good moments there. I met some good people, had some really good food, learned a lot about their culture.
Oh, I bet. Right.
Yeah, and so. Yeah, and so we had anytime we went somewhere, when I went somewhere, there's usually a Defense Attaché association, so that you can meet with your colleagues who have the same kind of job.
Yeah.
And sometimes one time I was in France, and the Russian who was the DAT for them. He invited me over, and we had a nice long conversation about how we can work together and what's going together. It was wonderful.
Right.
So in a condition when, the Taliban are shooting at you, that's a whole different thing. You'd be under the ground for, looking for some coverage.
Some kind of cover, right.
Yeah. But, the Germans and the French and the Italians and the Russians, they all have a defense attaché, and they all know what the job is like. And each of them, some of them were great folks. I got to be good friends.
He says some of them. Huh?
Well, you don't usually get friendly to everyone because it's too many people.
Yeah, I see.
But they are doing the same thing for their country that I'm doing for theirs, and we understand that. And there's very little friction between those of us who are in those organizations.
That's great.
Yeah, I've got a couple of glasses in my cupboard that says the Attaché Association of Kabul.
Oh wow.
AAAK.
Right.
Yeah, and so everybody who was there got a couple of.
Sure.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. You always meet some interesting people, and you always learn something.
What conversations you must have had. Wow, that's important stuff. That's really neat stuff.
Yeah, it is. And
it must have been, yeah.
Yeah, one time I was going with my driver to one of those organizational meetings, and a number of the guys from like Russia and other places were speaking Russian, and I was just sort of listening for a little while, and then they asked something, and I actually spoke to them in Russian. They all went, "What?"
Good thing we weren't talking about you.
It wasn't a big deal, but it was interesting.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's great. Do you ever mess around with the Russian, or is it kind of fading, or do you try to keep up on it? Well, French, I guess. You were better at French, weren't you?
Yeah, I was better at French.
Yeah, okay.
So for a while, my Russian was quite good.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I was living in Ukraine, and
sure.
I decided, well, Ukraine is not going to be very, widespread in Poland or other places, right?
Yeah.
But Russian is a really important language.
Yeah.
So I can get by.
What do you think about that crazy war? Dare I ask even what's going on over there with the Russians and it's just crazy.
Oh, you mean, yeah, the war with Ukraine.
Yeah, right.
Putin just wanted the war. He decided that might be good. Basically, what he was expecting is that since, when he took Crimea and the other places and nothing really happened, he figured he could do whatever he wanted.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah. Are you of the opinion that he'll just keep going?
Well, he can't go on forever. He doesn't have enough
can't-
money and
Right.
stuff like that. But
He's not going to try to come through Poland or anything like that, or
you know what? Nobody thought he was going to invade
Good point,
Ukraine
yeah,
either. So
right.
the answer is, he is a absolute dictator, and will do what he wants. And if somebody gets in his way, and he gets like 2 chances.
really,
Once, do it my way. Second time, you blow it,
right?
you will probably not be alive.
Oh, really? Right.
Yeah, there's been a lot of executions
Yeah. Oh, right. Sure.
over
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you hear on the news that they'll say that we've always promised them that we're not going to bring them into NATO, and we've always promised, and we keep threatening with that. We keep like saying that we're going to bring them into NATO, but we've already promised Russia that we wouldn't. And talking about putting military places on his borderline, and then 2 weeks later he attacked them. It was like, well,
Yeah.
he might have been, protecting himself too. I mean, you could spin it that way. How some of them are, if you've got our vice president over there talking, about, we're going to try to get you into NATO and this and that, and then it leads to an invasion 2 weeks later. It's like, well, maybe we shouldn't have been pissing him off. But I don't know anything about Russia or Putin either, so I'm just kind of listening to one side of it. So, I don't know if he's a terrible guy, or was he forced into a corner to fight back and try to, so.
Well, he usually doesn't give anybody a chance to get back.
Yeah.
There's a book about Putin called The Man Without a Face,
Okay.
written by a Russian woman who was posted as a, let's see, not television, but she was a writer, and they were talking about how things go, this and that, that and this.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was in St. Petersburg when Putin was there, and that was when Putin was the KGB chief.
Oh, was he?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's how he took over. And the book, it's almost a scary book. It talks about things he's done and the way he looks at things. I highly recommend if you're interested.
Really?
Yep. It's a good book. Man Without a Face.
I'll pick that up.
Yep. And it's in the Monterey Library.
Yeah, we'll link it to the description too, on here so people can read it also. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting, it's what's going on right now, so.
It is, yeah. Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's just such a nightmare. We got, 2 wars going on now? Proxy wars, they call them. Because other people are fighting them for us or something. I don't know.
Well,
does that make sense?
You mean the Hamas thing with the Iranians and stuff? As far as I'm concerned, Netanyahu's done a horrible job of managing what happened.
Yeah.
Now, nobody thinks that, what the Hamas did, that was a terrorist thing.
Sure.
But then the things that he's done afterwards make him just as bad or worse.
Right.
Now other people feel otherwise, But
sure.
My perspective is that, the whole eye for an eye thing just kills everybody.
Yeah. Right.
That's not, and I've seen enough war to try to think of a different way to do it.
Right.
And having a ceasefire and making peace, or coming up with at least some things that give people hope.
Right.
The Israelis who continue to bomb places where there were children, and yes, Hamas has had.
That's what they say. Yeah, they've got offices in the basements of the hospitals and.
Right, and then they have them close by people.
Right.
And so. So the question is, let's see, how many people would discuss? It's a no-win situation.
Right.
But unless somebody's willing to change, nothing changes.
Right, right. Well, they say if Hamas laid down their weapons, then Israel would too. But if Israel laid down their weapons, Hamas would kill everybody. You know, it's just a different way of thinking. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I kind of get that. Thank God we don't live in that part of the world, you know. Man, oh man, it's just scary. Just as scary to think of.
Yeah.
Well, you were right there, front row, in some of that crap. But
Yeah. Well, the bottom line is sovereign countries will do what they decide they want to do, and you know, you can't always predict it, and so you do the best you can. You know, my perspective is anybody who wants to run for president doesn't really understand what a lousy job it really is.
I bet, right?
Oh, I mean, because it almost killed Billy Clinton. You know, he looked 30 years older when he came out.
So did Obama too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is so stressful.
Right.
That job is so stressful that, you know, I don't think anybody. My perspective is anybody who thinks they want that means they don't really understand it well enough.
Yeah, right. And they're a little bit, yeah.
And doesn't mean that they haven't been good presidents necessarily.
Sure.
But they don't really realize until they're in it deep what a painful job it is.
Yeah, I bet.
You know.
As long as they're going in for the right reasons.
Yeah.
I'm all for it, you know.
Yeah, if it's the right thing to do. If you know, somebody attacks the U.S. and we have reason to do it, you know.
Yeah.
But the best thing we can do is look for more peace.
Well, clearly, you know, they say, why do we have to choose between these two knuckleheads for president? It's like, well, nobody else is going to step up. They know we're better. It's just a nightmare of a job. Nobody wants it. That's
Well,
what it seems like to me.
Yeah, well, Biden and Trump seem to both want it. So
I guess.
yeah,
They're twisted, demented ways, huh?
yeah. Well, and who knows how that's going to turn out?
Yeah, it looks like Trump's going to take it, but you know, who knows, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Still months away.
Yeah, it's months away, and yeah, there's a lot of things still to come. But
One's talking nonsense because he seems to be, I don't know, a little too old for it, and the other one, I don't know. It's crazy.
yeah.
Anyways, back to the conversation.
Yeah.
Let's not get too political here. So, well, Afghanistan. What was it? Kuwait.
Oh, I went to the East-West Center.
Yeah.
It's something that's done in the Middle East, and I went there for about 3 days.
Oh, just 3 days.
And they were talking about the Kuwaitis were trying to get the East-West Center to help de-radicalize some of the militias and stuff like that. To try to get them to see the fact that not everything in the West is great, but neither is everything in the East. And you know, let's take a hard look and see if we can't move forward.
Right.
And I happened to be at the right place at the right time.
Just got to be there when everybody's putting their heads together and trying to figure out a better way.
And
right?
they were like, I mean, who wants to go? Well, I was in Afghanistan, and so it was a lot closer. So that's where I went.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, and I think the same thing's true. I think, and
then from there you went to France.
Yeah.
Okay. 2009. Well, that's a shoe fit right there because you already speak French, and so and you were a defense attaché there also. Yes,
Yep.
Of course. Right. Was there something going on there? Was it not being handled correctly? How'd you get into that gig?
The guy who was there, well, so we were in Hawaii at the time, and so when you go to assignments officer, there's people take turns being the guy, but when you're the assignments officer, you help. You say, okay, hey, let's say you went to, I don't know, some small country that was very peaceful, you know. And then they're like, okay, well, Sweeney was over, in Iraq, and, you're going to have to go.
Yeah, right.
And it's being there at the right time. And anyway, so we were in Hawaii, and we were thinking we might stay there for a while, maybe stay for good. We didn't know, but it was a pretty good place to live for a while.
Yeah, beautiful.
And I got this call from the assignments officer, and he says, "How would you feel about going to Paris?" And I said to him, because I've been around a while, I said, "Why are you calling me? You guys are, you usually have 5 or 6 people calling you. What's wrong with this picture?"
Yeah,
dude?
right.
Because I'd been the defense attaché, or the guy in charge of the whole place, right?
Right.
I know exactly how
it works.
Yeah,
Why are you
and
calling me?
And so I said, well, the guy who's here now is having a little trouble. He got himself in a little trouble. He was using embassy cars for his own use. That's the kind of stuff that gets you in trouble, gets you from being a full colonel to maybe a lieutenant colonel, maybe a major, depending on what happened, And so he didn't give me too much detail. He said, well, we got a guy, the IG was here, and he argued with the IG. That never works. All that tells him is he's hiding something.
Right.
And then they start digging. Anyway, and so they wanted, the guy was there to leave. He had done a good job for a while, but then he kind of got a little too full of himself. Right? That's why we usually only send people out for 3 years at a time, because you get too close sometimes.
Right.
And so mostly you can't, unless there's some real emergency, you get 3 years and gone.
Yeah.
Unless you marry somebody and change your life and everything.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Anyway, so they told me the story, and I said, okay, I got to think about this and talk, A, with my wife about this, and B, with my boss.
Right. Yeah, right.
Because he wasn't going to be happy, We've been there half a year.
Oh, no, right.
And we were having a good time. We enjoyed it.
Sure.
But
in Hawaii, of course.
Yeah. But then they're never going to call you twice.
Yeah, right.
You get one chance.
That's the rule, huh?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the way it's been, for a long time. You have to have the right background, the language skills, and have to be savvy.
Yeah.
And if you're in a small country someplace and you're a major, you don't need as much background.
Sure. Right.
And so there were a couple other folks that also spoke French. And one was a good friend of mine whose mom is French, and he speaks beautiful French. But he really was enjoying his job, and he was going to retire, and he retired.
Yeah, he's like, nope, not doing that.
Yeah, he said, but you will.
Yeah, right. Call Sweeney.
Yeah. And anyway, so I got there and found out what was wrong, and
did what you do, just took care of it, and made it work.
I made it work, and I had a lot of good people, and we did a lot of really good things. Yeah, I got to see a lot of things.
Yeah, right.
And the worst thing about Paris is that, so the guy who was before me, he tried to figure out how many people who were 3 stars or above came to Paris. 300 a year.
Wow.
Yeah, and that means you got to be 3-star to start.
Right.
But then that means congressmen, that is other ambassadors, but everybody wants to go to Paris for something or this or that and everything, and so it was a wonderful place to live, interesting place. It was, I got to do a fascinating thing. I got my picture. I got to hand from Obama with my picture and everything, and because I was there at the right place at the right time, and there are a lot of good people there. but it wears you down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my job at that point, I had to have my phone with me all the time. And every now and then it was ugly.
Yeah, right. So
but
did
it was, less ugly than it was fun.
Yeah. Seemed
But
like there was a lot of entertaining or more
A lot of
that
entertaining.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of like,
Yeah. And then you got to herd the big cheese.
Sure, right.
And when you get 300 a year, so basically what happens is you work your ass off from like September all the way to August. In August, the French closed down.
Oh, right.
And then, and you're not going to be able to, unless some crisis is going on, you're not going to see the president or anybody else. It's just not going to happen.
They do just shut down, huh?
Yeah, they
That's
pretty
right.
much do.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, and so the only saving grace is that you get a whole, what is it? So like a month, 2 months.
Vacation, huh?
Yeah, and you can actually relax.
Yeah.
Because that's where the French start to disappear.
Well deserved. Yeah,
so,
right.
I mean, so it was a wonderful job and a terrible job at the same time.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of how Keeley explained it to you too. It was a beautiful place, but it was just, you were just so busy entertaining, and there's parties, and there's this and that, and there's just
And writing
too
things.
much. Yeah, writing things too. What do you mean?
Well,
You got to make a report on everything that you do.
no, you don't have to do that. But when
No.
you find something that will be interesting to people in Washington, you send it.
Oh, okay.
You write about it and you send it.
Yeah, right. Something that you came across or heard, somebody you talked to, or whatever happened.
Every now and then. I mean, at one point when I was in Budapest, shortly after 9/11, the Chinese Defense Attaché approached me and said, we will not be involved in this, but we are sorry that you've gone through this and everything. I was the first person in the United States to send that from China.
Wow.
And I was just the right place, the right time.
Yeah, right.
And that's kind of one of the things you do.
Yeah, right. Had to do it. It was there, right.
And so I don't regret being there, but I'm not going to sign up for second tour. Yeah.
Done my time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. Then back to Ethiopia.
Yeah.
In 2012. So
we had a number of choices, and one of the things we decided to do was because we have, I have 5 kids altogether.
okay.
Keely and I have 2 girls, and I have.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I got several other.
Yeah.
So I got 5 kids altogether.
Wow.
And we wanted them to see, because they were in Paris, is a pretty nice place, right? Well, in Ethiopia, I mean, the rest of the world doesn't live like people in France mostly, and so we kind of wanted them to be normal kids, and they went to a national school or international school, and they made great friends that they still are in touch with.
Really?
Yeah, and so they didn't become, a lot of kids, if they're, parents aren't down to earth or everything, they kind of get their nose in the air.
Sure.
Well,
right.
we wanted them to see how the rest of the world lived.
Take them to Ethiopia.
And Ethiopia is kind of the opposite. But we did. We went and saw a lot of good things.
Yeah.
And they had a wonderful school there.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. It's an international school. It was very well done.
Uh-huh.
The kids really liked it.
Yeah. Got to meet kids from all over the world, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those kids, like our kids, traveled, and so they kind of found folks more like them.
Yeah. It's probably a little more mature group of kids.
Yeah, because of the moving.
Through. Yeah.
They have to adapt.
Sure. Right. Yeah. That's good. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
So that was kind of fun. Yeah, and we just decided, okay, you kind of lived in Paris. Now we're going to go live someplace else that's different, and we want you to understand that. And they've turned out great.
Yeah. Right. What a great thing to do.
Yeah. Well, we were at the right place at the right time.
Yeah. Right. Well,
and I'd been in Ethiopia. I did like 18 months.
Sure.
I had a guy I had to fire and send away.
Again.
Yeah, and then the general said, okay, well, you're going to have to take his place until I get somebody else.
Dang it. Shouldn't have fired him.
Oh, well.
Had to do it. What was he doing?
He was busy having an affair.
Oh, nice. You know, it's funny. My grandpa was a big-time golfer back in the 30s and 40s. And there was this book that he used to hand out to everybody, and it was called the Go-Getter, or the Blue Vase Go-Getter. And he was a World War II veteran, maybe World War I. And interesting story, but one of the storylines was that they were trying to find somebody to take over their, I think it was Japanese areas for lumber division. And the guy that had been sent over there was just a magnificent, amazing guy. But once he got that far from home, it just kind of fell apart. The wheels came off, and he lost him, and he was like, it seems like you've run into that a few times like that. It's one of my favorite books, but it's just, I see that similarity in there.
Yeah, so some people, we had a guy, I wasn't in charge of this one, but we had a guy who went, he was going to be going to Israel.
Okay.
And so I wasn't the commandant, wasn't responsible for him then, but I heard this before I was an attaché. And so this guy, he gets on a plane, the folks are expecting him in Israel. And he gets to Israel. This gal, he was like in one chair, and then somebody else in this gal, and they started talking and so forth and so on. And then he landed, and she said, "Why don't we have a drink or something? Whatever."
Mm-hmm.
And we had guys looking for that, because the Israelis look for that. They want, if somebody is biddable, they're going to go after him. He spent exactly 3 days in Israel and never came back.
No kidding.
Well, he came. He didn't come back to Israel, but he's never going to be an attaché, and he never got promoted again.
Really? Right.
Because
bad choices.
Exactly.
Whoops.
Yeah, and you see people who never have those problems, and other people who just don't have the wherewithal to walk away.
Right.
When they should.
Just figure they're too far away from home. Nobody's going to know or whatever. Everybody's watching.
Yeah. That's one of the things, we have folks watching that.
Really?
To make because otherwise you wouldn't know.
Right.
And the Israelis are they have lots of people in there.
Yeah.
And you'll never know what their thing is, but you'll know if the guy or gal, it's gals too, who decided, oh, well, I could enjoy a night,
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You get one night and one trip back.
See ya.
And yeah, I luckily I was beyond that by now.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. Exactly. Oh man. So what'd you do next? 2014 to 17. Looks like FAO chair at the Naval Postgraduate School.
Yeah.
So had you retired by that point after Ethiopia?
No, this was my last tour.
This was your last? Okay.
I came here, and and so I wanted to help train and sort of mentor folks who were going to do work like I did.
Right.
And so there's a job there at an NPS, and it's called the FAO chair, Foreign Area Officer chair.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And one of the things we do is we don't send people out there to get in trouble, but what happens so what we try to do is, okay, these folks they're young, like my first time, and I've done more than almost everybody else.
I know, right?
And so I was perfect for that job.
Sure.
And one of the things they do, they are in the process of getting past their language skills. They got to do that with DLI. And then they they need to figure out, okay, where am I going? How's it going to work? And they have all these questions, right? And so the biggest job there is to answer their questions when they're like, hey, I'm supposed to be here in like 3 weeks. Can I change that? Because I thought we were going to have this much time. And sometimes, somebody dies or something else happens that,
Sure.
And there are times when they're like, no, actually, you have to do this.
Yeah. Right.
But we'll bring you back.
I see.
And then the other things are like, folks have a second marriage, and one of the kids is, in high school and another's in college. How do I take care of how do I, get my college student there, and where's he going to be? And I know exactly where to go, who to call,
right,
to say, okay, here's how this is going to go for you, and then you got to look at some things.
This is what you need to know.
But yeah, and then so I would say, okay, call this embassy, and this. There's something called they're like warrant officers they are warrant officers, and their job is to make sure everything's going to go smooth when the new guys get there. And one of their jobs is like, hey, I'm going to take my car. Is that going to work? So you call this guy, and he answers all those questions for you. And I knew enough of it to get to the right people. And that's a big thing for them because they're all worried about my family and this and that. I'm excited to go. I got the language, but how am I going to get my laundry?
Yeah, right.
And
basic things.
Yeah, and the answer is, like if you're in a big embassy, depending on where, like as the Defense Attaché, I had a big house with everything you could want, right? Well, and sometimes these guys are, junior warrant officers, and they're going to get a housing allowance and all that and everything.
Sure, right.
But they're not going to be get it as fast.
Yeah.
So that's why you say, okay, call this guy or gal, because sometimes they're gal.
Sure.
And they know all those details, and they can walk you through it. And if you have really urgent circumstances, we can bring you guys back for a very short period of time or something, or move you to someplace that you're more comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys are trying to learn what, sort of finish this. And then they have this other thing. And so I would, they would, knock on my door and ask me questions, and I could answer 98% of everyone.
Right, yeah.
And at least tell them what'll happen, how to get there.
Right.
And it's actually not going to be that difficult.
Yeah. So it wasn't your job so much to teach them how to be a defense attaché, but how to get by.
Yeah.
Once you get there and
Yeah.
be comfortable enough to do your job and have to worry about 1,000 other things going on.
Right.
Yeah.
And I also, while I was there, I taught a class on. They only had a couple of African folks at the time, and so I taught class about about Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa. So it's part of the curriculum.
No kidding.
If they signed up for it, yeah.
Yeah, right.
And I've been everywhere.
I know,
in
right?
that arena, and so
Exactly.
and not to say that the guy who came after me wouldn't have been just as good or better.
Yeah.
But I was there, and I wanted to give back and to help train those folks who were going to go and do what I did.
Yeah. Right.
Sort of paying it back.
Yeah. Was it hard for you when you got there, when those different things, did you have to did you have a guy like you had to get all that stuff straightened out for you? Understand what I'm saying?
I had a guy or a gal.
So you
there was
knew
always somebody,
how important it was.
Yeah.
Right. Perfect.
Yeah. And so that was something that is important too.
Yeah.
Because if the family's happy.
Well, see, that's it, right?
The boss will be happy.
Yeah, right.
I mean, no matter what kind of problem you might have, most of them can be solved fairly easily if you know where to go.
Yeah.
And so in 2017, I hit my mandatory retirement.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. And so this is my last thing, and I decided I'd try to help people answer the questions, help make it easier for them, and mentor them.
Mm.
And I also enjoyed doing the teaching.
Yeah, right.
And, I'd known for years that I was going to have to leave when I turned 62.
62.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's been there for years. Because, sorry. And so, like, if there's a 3 or 4 star general who's doing something really important or whatever, congressman, it takes a congressman. If you're a colonel or above, it takes a congressman to allow you to go past that. Mm. And usually it's only for like a 3 or 4 star general.
Right.
And I was never going to be one of those guys.
Yeah.
And never worried about it.
Yeah, right.
I had a wonderful career.
Did you ever come to Monterey before that? Or did you ever? No.
Well, so, we visited when we were looking at other places.
Uh-huh.
Some folks had told us it was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And so we came and we spent some time at the Navy Lodge checking it all out. And, of course, it was rainy and stuff.
Yeah, right.
when you do it. But, we'd heard a lot about it. And
it's crazy that you landed right here and just retired, and here you are. That's awesome. Is that how you plan it? I mean, did you find Monterey and then decide to go into the
we
FOA
looked at
chair? Or?
Well, Keely and I came and went and looked at it, and we said, hey, well, it looks like a nice place.
Yeah.
And then we went to Las Mesas, with they got that military housing up there.
Mm.
So we came in and we lived there for 2 years.
Okay.
And could have done something else, but
sure.
we did that for 2 years, and then we decided to buy a house and stay.
Kids were probably moved out by then.
No,
almost.
Not yet. Yeah.
Not yet, right?
They're all gone now.
Yeah, right. Not at that time,
well,
quite
I have
yet.
5 kids in 5 places.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
it's a juggling act. Like, where were we and who was where? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we know where they're at most of the time. Yeah.
I mean, where were we when we had them? And you did so many changes and moves and 5 kids, and you made it work.
Yeah. And they've all turned out well so far. Life's not over, but So USAID does a lot of things to help. They try to influence. They want to help change things. Like they have some of that goes on, particularly if there's a famine or something.
Oh, okay. Is it kind of like a UNICEF, or is just kind of a?
It's a different
management type.
Yeah, it's more of a management.
I see. Yeah.
USAID. It's aid for people like in Ukraine to help them move forward.
I see. After the war, or during.
Well, there was no war.
Nothing go right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking now. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. 2000, attended the graduate from U.S. Army War College. Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah.
Now, what is it? Tell me what a war college is. We did have an Air Force guy in here he had 4 masters, one from the War College. It's like, holy cow, what the hell's a war college?
Well, the War College is basically, it's like a master's program in really understanding what we do in if you're in the Air Force, what the Air Force is doing.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things they talk about is strategy and tactics.
Tactics and strategy.
And when Colin Powell was involved in the first Gulf War, he had a list of things as to what to do.
Mm.
And that list is still very much accurate, because it's like know your enemy, know yourself, et cetera, et cetera. And training the folks who are going to be, colonels and then generals, they start doing some of that when you're a major.
Mm.
And then the idea behind the War College is to really get you to understand what works and what doesn't from the reading and from all the history we've got, that some things work and some things don't.
Mm.
And they talk a lot about the things we did wrong.
Mm.
Because
That's good.
That's one of the best ways to figure out to do it differently if it comes to you later.
Sure, right.
And I learned a lot about things in the war college.
Yeah.
So it's about making sure we understand how to make war in a way that makes sense instead of stupidly.
Right, right.
So to have the right strategy and the right tactics and the right people and the right equipment. And then it's also about hearing from the senior guys, who some of them are no longer there, but the guys who were there who were in Vietnam. And one of the things that I got to do, because it was the right place at the right time, when I told you about my, I got a lot of mentoring from folks. Well, the captain, the colonel, and the light colonel, and the major, the guys who I was under, those people who had been in Vietnam, they decided to fix the Army, and they did. They changed it dramatically. The folks who stayed there, they made the Army that took down, Hussein in 3 days.
Yeah, right.
And so those folks, they made a commitment to fix the Army and make it different.
Yeah.
And they did.
Was it Desert Storm, is that, or Desert Shield? I don't know what that was. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was
something different, or
the first
same
one,
era, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there are so many things that went wrong in Vietnam that those guys, they lived through it, they worked at it, and they came up with a much better Army when they finished.
Right, right.
And I had folks who taught me, almost everything I learned. And so that was really important. I learned an awful lot from folks who'd been around and had been in Vietnam.
Oh, right, right.
And they saw a lot of ugly things, and they saw some good things, and they made a commitment. There was no formal thing that they did, but they all came together, and the Army changed a lot. I mean, there were a lot of good things going on before, but it really, the Army that took down Hussein in 3 days, the Russians were scared spitless after that.
Really? Yeah, right. Yeah.
They had no idea where all that came from.
Yeah, boy, in 77, you must have been surrounded by Vietnam vets.
Yeah.
I bet, huh? Right.
Oh, yeah.
They were still very active.
But they also know, that they have to train us.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And that's what I tried to do also.
Yeah. So I hear about, I don't know much, people talk about it kind of went wrong when we started privatizing a lot of the military.
That was a huge mistake.
Was it?
Yes.
To walk me through that. When did that start? How could we privatize our military?
Because Cheney owned
Back to
a
this
lot
guy.
of money.
He owed a lot of money?
He had a lot of his own interests in those companies.
It's back to businesses.
Yeah.
And the almighty dollar.
Yeah, and Cheney's a horrible guy.
Really?
He doesn't seem to have any remorse for all those kids who died.
Yeah.
And
they talk about the military complex.
Yeah, and Cheney, worked it so that he got richer, and used those contractors that helped him get richer.
Yeah. How is it that people in government are allowed to even invest in those kind of companies? That's so wrong. There should be
I don't
something
think that's a good idea either.
Yeah, that's a conflict of interest on so many ugly ways. Whether it's Boeing or, whatever. It just doesn't seem senators and shouldn't be able to invest in that kind of stuff.
And there have been attempts to do that.
Is there?
But there have been attempts to do that in the past. And usually one of the very senior people make a hold on it.
Strike it down. Yeah, right.
I mean, there are a lot of people.
Well, they talk about it
here.
with the prisons. They talk about it with, this and that. It's like, well, that seems kind of counterproductive because it seems like you're going to be trying to pick up more people, throw them in jail if you're going to make more money off of the government that's paying you to do that. Well, it's the same damn thing in the military. It seems like, you know, you can't.
It's similar, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's still wrong.
It's still wrong.
From my perspective.
Yeah, right.
I think folks who are like on the committees should not be able to vote.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, because
vote, right. Yeah.
Well,
that's the way it goes.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to change that in the next 10 years.
No.
I
should
should
say.
say.
We'll have it finished by tonight. We'll have it all worked out.
Well, let me know when that happens.
Right. Oh, what do you think about? You know, I hear a lot about how terrible we pulled out of Afghanistan. Yeah, I don't. You know, I'm a massage therapist. I got my head in the dark room all day long. I don't know what's going on in the news, but you know, you hear, oh, we left everything over there. Well, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem. What happened there?
I don't know.
You weren't there either, right?
As long since. You know,
yeah.
Since I was there.
But you kept up on it better than the rest of us.
They did the same thing that the Russians did. They just kind of.
Oh, really? Did the Russians do that too?
Yeah.
They just backed out and left everything there?
Well, they still have an embassy and runways and stuff, because they could go back at some point if they need to.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah.
But it was terribly done. And
yeah.
When I was a major, I could have fixed that.
Right.
Yeah, but it was people like Cheney and others who don't get it.
Yeah.
They don't really understand.
But he is military, though, isn't he, Cheney? Or was he
I don't think I ever spent a day.
Oh, he wasn't military.
No.
Oh, okay, right.
No, but when it came to, you know, investing his money.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
He knew where to put it. Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I'm just not impressed.
Not impressed.
No. Oh, well.
We got to get you to write a book, man. You've been all over the world. You changed the world.
Well, I was able to do some good things.
Yeah, right.
I've been to a lot of the world, but there's a lot of the world I haven't seen.
Yeah. Well, this is what this podcast's all about, man. I love talking about the journey through life. What a journey you've had, man. How kick ass.
Yeah, I've had quite a journey, and I'm blessed.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And happy to have done the right thing in a lot of places, right? You know?
Yeah. I think I was blessed in many ways.
Yeah, right. I know your wife is so proud of you. I've talked to her on the podcast before, and, you know, she had a great time, whether it was, you know, in Paris or...
It took her a while at first, but then she loved it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and she's got a lot of friends from the travel overseas.
Neat. Yeah, right. And her work over there, and, yeah. Well-lived life, my friend. Well, thank you so much for coming in today and educating on us.
Yeah. Did you get Jenkins to do this?
Twice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But now I've read his book, so, you know, now I know a little bit more where he's been. You know,
well, it was interesting when he and I were talking about some of those places.
I know. I'm just a fly on the wall going, you did what? Woo! Yep.
Yeah, well, life goes on.
Yeah, buddy. All right. Well, thanks you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. If you think about it, give me a thumbs up, maybe subscribe, and we'll talk to you real soon. Love you guys. See ya.